Hey everybody, this is Rudy Sarza with The Dash, and my very, very special guest today is none other than Rob Blasko.
Yes.
Bassist for Ozzy. I mean, I don't even have to tell you that. Everybody knows that. And also, you have a podcast.
I have a couple, yeah.
You have a couple of podcasts. Yeah. What are they called?
I have one that I've been doing for about a year and a half now called Managemental, and that's me and my buddy Mike Mowry. And that's once a week. And that's like a music business. So like we pick a topic and then we just kind of riff on the topic. And it's pretty cool. We've been doing it for a while now. I think the next episode will be episode 70. So we've been 70. Oh my goodness. So we've been rolling.
And and you mentioned you have two, and the other one is
and the other one is new. It's called A New Level, and that is me interviewing like architectural entrepreneurs of the heavy metal rock and roll business, right? So like Brian Slagle from Metal Blade and Kim that manages Pantera, and like people, friends of mine, and it's a short form, 30 minutes formatted podcast in that I ask everybody the same questions because that podcast is specifically mission based, and as you know, you've been in the business for a long time. I'm sure that you get people going up to you going, how do I do what you do, man? How do I get to the next level? And so it's like, I don't have any answers for that. All I know is what I did, and what I did, assumably is different than what you did, And so I was like, but there has to be a common thread. There has to be something that ties all of us together. It isn't like, because the one thing that I know is that everyone that built this business wasn't given some gift. They didn't have an unfair advantage. They literally had $5 and they started in their mom's garage, and they just built it because they have passion for heavy metal, and they just did it because of the passion, and they were able to build a business out of it. And so I was like, I have a mission, man. I have to find out what the commonality is so I can share that. So whenever someone does ask me, how do I level up? So I have at least a hypothesis of an answer, So that is 10 episodes. I released them all on one day so that people could binge them. So I'm kind of doing that more as like a seasonal thing where I'll do like 10 episodes and then drop the 10 episodes, kind of like a Netflix thing,
Yeah, it sounds like completely a passion project of yours.
It
because,
is.
I mean, you're also, in addition to everything else that you do, you're the busiest guy in the entertainment industry because you're a manager too, and that's 24/7.
It's insane.
It's got to be insane.
Yeah.
Okay, some of your clients are actually Zakk Wild.
Sure.
Black Label.
Yep. So all of Zakk's projects. So it's Zakk himself, and then everything related to him. So Black Label, Society, Wild Audio, his guitar company that we started, and just everything associated with him, and then also Andy Biersack, who has Black Veil Bride. So those are like my Zakk and Andy are like my two main clients, and then everything associated with them because Andy is a solo guy as well as with Black Veil Brides, as well as an actor and a model, and there's just both those guys are scalable in interesting ways that not a lot of rockers are. So they're kind of entrepreneurial, sort of in their own way. So it's interesting, from a manager to come into it and just be like, oh, how do I scale these guys beyond records and T-shirts? How do I create businesses with them that give them alternate streams of income? So that's what I did.
You articulate your strategy unlike other musicians that I know. Is this something you study in school?
I think it's just survival, man. Like every day I worry that the bottom's going to fall out. I graduated high school in 1988, and the next day I went on tour.
With who?
With Cryptic Slaughter.
And you guys were signed to?
Yeah, we were on Metal Blade Records.
Metal Blade.
Yeah, so by the time I graduated high school in 1988, I had already put out 3 records on Metal Blade and gone on tour and stuff. So yeah, I literally graduated high school. Next day, got in a van and we went on tour for 3 weeks across the U.S. And so I've sort of built this miniature empire of heavy metal, and I'm just always concerned that it could at any day end. So I think that, you know, my enthusiasm is really solely based on survivalism.
Well, and also being a fan. I mean, you love what you do.
Of course, there's nothing that I'd rather do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like whenever I joined Ozzy's band, which was like 2006, right? That's whenever I started managing, because I was like, at that point, I had climbed the ladder of the heavy metal hired gun bass player guy, right? Like I did my own thing. I didn't really like being in a band with other guys so much in that where it was your own band. Like I didn't really like that environment, just because I felt like the end result of everything always had to be a compromise.
Yeah,
and everything was always a fight.
I know.
And everything was a struggle, and it was just tough to get four dudes on the same page all the time to get to the end result. And that just felt like banging my head against the wall. And then, so one day I made this decision. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to play in other people's bands. Like, I would rather just get a day sheet and know when to show up. Like, this is bus calls at 2 a.m., show up, here's the set list, learn the songs. I'd rather be that guy. And somehow, by saying that, I manifested a reality of, like, going from then Prong into Danzig, into Rob Zombie, into Ozzy Osbourne. So at the moment when I got to Ozzy Osbourne, I was like, I've ticked all the boxes. You know, like I've ran out of upward momentum, and I was like, but I love the business, and I love the genre, and I love music, and I'm so passionate about it. There's nothing else that I'd rather do, but I also don't necessarily want to be a hired gun bass player guy for the rest of my life, you know. And then where do I go from Ozzy? If I have to continue to go up, where do I go? Like AC/DC, Metallica? Well, those gigs are spoken for. So I go, I'm gonna create a management company, and that way that keeps me in the business, and it provides me an opportunity to have some creativity, you know, and I get to help people build their careers. So I thought that was kind of a fun thing to do, and I've been doing it now for 13 years. Yeah.
What have you learned from Sharon?
Oh man, like, it's so great that she's there as a resource, because, you know, what you learn from her is that you can be tough without having to be an asshole. Mm-hmm. You know, like, yeah. you don't have to be, because from that era, there was so many people that were just like screamers, and you know what I'm talking about, like the guys that pick up the phone and just berate and scream at people and stuff, and you know, in this era, you don't have to be that way anymore to get, you know, you can be nice. Of course, there's moments when you have to be stern, and you have to know where your leverage is, and you can get what you need done. You can accomplish those things without having to be just overly critical about what it is, and just sort of berate people and disrespect people. I don't think that's necessary anymore. And so to me, it's like, she can turn it on if she has to.
Oh, yeah.
You know, for sure.
I've seen it.
Yeah, she can turn it on. But her exterior is nothing but warm and generous, and, you know, and I love being able to see that in action. Absolutely. You know, yeah, to where it's like, man, I wouldn't want to be on the dark side of that, but being on the good side is great, but being able to see to where it's like, you don't have to be so one way, you don't have to be a bully. Yeah. You know, unless of course at some point it's necessary to be, but you can turn it on. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of one of the main things that I walked away from. I
always give Sharon credit for everything that I've learned. 95% of what I learned about the business was while I was playing with Ozzy, because she was tremendous. Yeah. Definitely the best manager I've ever worked with. Absolutely. Yeah. Going back to the way things used to be, transition, you know, let's say, for example, Sharon had to go through the transition of the way things were back in the 70s. Because remember, Ozzy in 1981, it was still basically the 70s. You know, MTV was not out yet, and we didn't have the same impact. Even radio wasn't the same as it was later on when it started to embrace heavy metal, you know. And so you fast forward that 30, 35, 40 years later, today, there's so many changes. How do you adapt to the changes? Because you mentioned, how long have you had the management company?
13 years.
13 years. You've seen changes in 13
yeah.
years. So let's say a new band. What can you advise them?
Yeah, and I try and keep it real. And as often as I can, I do have like consultations, quote unquote, with people that are struggling, that don't understand. And I do it to kind of keep it real, and it also, too, it keeps me in the mix of knowing where things are at. But, we're experiencing a daily change. The digital music business is moving at such a fast rate. And there's so many people that are coming in the mix and creating new platforms. Even just today, Musically, that was a very popular app, with the kids or whatever, that's gone. And now it's called TikTok. And now they've merged into this new thing, and Facebook is involved. Like, it's just, but it's maybe nothing that my bands need to worry about. But the point of it is that it's a music-centric app that the younger generation is adapted to. And so we need to know when those things are happening and why those things are happening. And so it's a constant shift and change. And I think to be able to move in this business, you have to be super adaptable, and and it's impossible to keep up. Think about it now, that where like you have access to everything. Like when I was a kid growing up, you chose to listen to a record, or you chose to put in a VHS tape, or you chose to go to a movie, you chose to go outside and throw the football around, or ride your BMX bike, or ride your skateboard. But it was relatively simple, your choices. It was one or the other, right? Now think about being a kid, what choices you have. I can listen to any music I want to on Spotify, any record, any single, any playlist, whatever. I can listen to anything. On YouTube, I can type in and watch anything that I want, right? At access video games, I can play any video game that I want. I can play Star Wars video games on my phone, think of how much attention of media is pulling people in all directions, to where it's like, in a lot of ways, music isn't a priority for kids anymore because YouTube is better, or video games are better, or, whatever, or being even a content creator. People being YouTube rock stars. Think about that. Like, whenever we were coming up, it's like, to be a rock star, you had to be a real rock star. Like, you had to look at David Lee Roth and you go, I'm either cut out for that or I'm not. Yeah. But whenever you simplify it, at least I'm not saying that being a YouTube star is simple, but what I'm saying is the observation. Someone looking at that and goes, man, all they're doing is getting in front of their computer and taping it and putting it on the internet, and look at them, they're stars. Like this, doing a podcast. Like, I'm sure you're going to start facing this if you haven't already, but how many people just go like, oh, podcasting, that's just so easy. Like, you just put a microphone up and you just talk. And it's like, well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Like, if you want to be a successful podcaster, like, there has to be an angle. There has to be a story. You still have to record it. You still have to have equipment to record it. You still got to edit it, and then you still got to find a way to put it on the internet. And then once it's on the internet, then you got to find ways to promote it. There's a lot of effort. It's not just, but from the outside observation, it's as simple as recording some stuff and putting it on iTunes. The outside observation isn't as difficult as it is. So think about that now. Think about the distractions there are of, if you're a kid now, So it's tough, man. I guess my long-winded point is that as a manager in 2018, 2019, you got to adapt, and you got to adapt fast, and you got to know where your audience is, and you got to know where to find them, and you got to give them what they want. Now, the advantage of that is that now you can ask them what they want. We have the ability to reach them and ask them, hey, which T-shirt do you like? Hey, do you want a single, an EP, or an album? Like, you can talk to them now, and young bands that have found a way to game the system, if you will. It's like they can build a fan base online before they even need a record or like a label or a manager or any of that, right? And they can build a fan base, and they can and they can get to the point to where they can put a single out and they can put a video out and build a fan base. And then they don't need to put out anything more until the fan base tells them that they want it. You know, oh, okay, great. Like, well, now we're going to give you an EP, or now we're going to give you an album, because now there's a